Most of us want to read more books, to learn more about the world, to become an expert on our field and throw out smart quotes during a discussion. Whether it's by curiosity or by necessity, it all started like this. We picked up the book, we love it, it changed our life. We thought, if this small book changed the way I see the world, what's going to happen when I read 10, 20, 50? And since we are pretty much stuck up at home, it may be the perfect occasion to catch up on our reading list. Hi, I'm N, Monsieur N. And 4 years ago, I read some incredible books that changed my vision of the world. Getting Done by David Allen, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Yes, you probably at least heard about them, and for a good reason. Those type of books are wonderful. They are easy to read and at the same time so deep. The problem is, even if they motivate us to push things even further, few of us will actually succeed in reading more. Because aside from those type of fiction, small books, reading is freaking hard. They say the average CEO reads 50 books a year. When I started reading, I told myself that if I could go from 3 to 50 books a year, I'll have the knowledge of a CEO. Fast forward a few years, and that's exactly what didn't happen. With time, I gradually increased my reading ability. I ended up reading 80 books in 2017 and 37 books in 2018. Not quite bad. What's even better is that my knowledge of the world and specific subjects like psychology, biology spiked up. I was clearly becoming smarter. The problem is that in 2019 I read 30 books. Yeah, not bad. I really wanted to read faster, and I put a lot of energy on it. The problem is, I stumbled on some difficulty. If I started reading more and more, I found that I remember less and less from them. And if I took my time, I was reading painfully slow. So, I took a break. I did some research to find solution. Okay, I did research on Google. But I found those tips. Reading during commutes. Cut your social media so you can read books when you're bored. Focus on reading without distraction, and of course, sacrifice your soul to top the god of books. No, I'm kidding. They definitely didn't say that at all. And although those advice worked great, I wanted something more deep. What makes us not only read more but also learn more? Then I thought, wait, reading is a cognitive skill, a function that arises from process in our brain. So if I figure out how the mind reads, I'll have a better clue on how to read more. And this time I researched evidence-based information on how the mind reads. I found out the book from Daniel T. Willingham, The Reading Mind. Well, that's pretty straightforward. So he takes us through the processes of how the mind generates reading. And for some disclaimer, the book and the science behind reading is incredibly vast, and me shrinking it down into 2 tips just don't give it justice. So if you want to learn more about the neuroscience of reading, definitely check out the book in the description. So, from all the different processes that our brain used to convert meaningless figure into meaning, 2 stood out because they were the only one that anyone could increase almost indefinitely. The first way of speeding our reading is increasing our vocabulary depth. Here's the word I've always had problem with: obnoxious. I kind of know what it means, I can guess its function in a phrase, but I definitely can't give you a proper definition of it. My knowledge of the word is shallow, and I couldn't guess before checking that this phrase was wrong. This mind doesn't show it often. It's really obnoxious. Obnoxious means very unpleasant, and even though another can be obnoxious, we don't usually describe a person as obnoxious because of the other. Remember any little brat in school who tosses out something very mean once in a while to a random classmate without caring the slightest about their feeling? Yes, that's being obnoxious. And I still hate fields here. We humans store the meaning of the word differently than dictionaries. We associate words with context, not with definitions. That means the more we learn words in different phrases and contexts, the deeper we understand them. Let's take an example with platypus. If you just kind of know the word, you'll probably think about a mammal which has a beak. But if you have a deep knowledge of it, you think about Australia, the fact that his real eggs are poisonous, that he can lay eggs, and of course... But how does our brain store meaning? And how does it help us reading faster? You can imagine that every word in your brain is stored in the form of web, interlinking words that are used in similar contexts. The more you come into contact with them, the better a representation of the word become, and the quicker you understand meaning in a sentence. Yeah, yes. But how does it work? Let's form a phrase right now and simulate what happens in your brain when it tries to recognize words. I was at a restaurant last night. And as you can see, as the word restaurant enters your consciousness, it pre-activates other words that may be associated with it. Coffee, girls, waiters, food, burgers. This pre-activation make your brain think, this may probably come at the next word, so get ready. The waiters spilled. And because waiters was so expected in a restaurant, it was immediately recognized, even before your recognition patterns fully decode the word. And spill also pre-activate a set of words. Water, glass, cup of coffee, tea, mess, cleaning. My cup of coffee on my shirt. And indeed, cup and coffee enter consciousness faster than shirt. Yes, but how do we know that? Well, it's a pretty good study by Mayer and Schwanavel that explains that. In a study, we take participants and give them two words. Sometimes words are real, sometimes they are fake. The job, pressing yes button when the both words are real. No, if one or two are fake. What they don't tell participants is that when both words are real, sometimes they are related. And when we measure the speed of reaction, we see that people are more than 2 times faster to identify words when they are under related words rather than unrelated words, as if related words were somehow more linked, more activated, unrelated words, speeding up our ability identifying words and understanding sentence. On the other hand, if you don't have enough depth of vocabulary, it may take you several seconds to guess the appropriate meaning or context of the word. 2. Knowledge of the word. Have you ever read a passage of a textbook and felt like you understood nothing at all? It feels like you get every phrases, but you don't have a damn idea of what this damn paragraph means. Well, having a hard time extracting ideas from phrases is actually the second problem of reading faster. A lot of factors can affect it. The first one is obviously the ability to understand the structure of a sentence. That's actually grammar, but most of us master grammar, right? The more common problem we may encounter is to clarify confusion in the text. For example, if I say, Mary beat Julie during a race, she congratulated her with a smile. Even if I don't specify that Julie handshook Mary, you know by experience that usually losers congratulate winners. Because of that, authors often skip detailed explanation of the situation, judging that readers will probably make inferences on their own, using their knowledge of the world. Therefore, if you don't have good knowledge about the world, these tiny little details about places, how people react to situations, habit, cliché of some countries, you most likely don't read as fast as you could. And what happens when you fail to connect ideas? Not only will you fail to understand the general plot of the story, but you may read several pages of a book before realizing that you clearly missed a critical point. Here's another sentence from the Reading Mind book. Read it carefully. Superconductivity is the disappearance of resistance to flow of electric current. Until now, it has only been obtained by cooling certain materials to lower temperature near absolute zero. That made its technical application very difficult. Many laboratories are now trying to produce superconducting alloys. Many materials with this property, with immediate technical applicability, have recently been discovered. Until now, superconductivity has been achieved by considerably increasing the temperature of certain materials. Did you notice that the second sentence directly conflicts with the last one? Probably not. You will have continued reading it thinking that you have a general idea of the subject. Then, what happens when you have a good knowledge of the word? The more expertise someone has on a subject, like football, the faster he'll be able to understand the continuity of sentence and extract the general idea of every paragraph, chapter, or book. Let's look at this experiment. Researchers took 4 groups of students. Students with a high and lower Weber skill, and students with high and low knowledge of football. Then they read a story about football and experimenters measure their comprehension and recall. As you can see, it doesn't matter if you have high or low verbal skill. Having expertise in football will boost your comprehension and recall more than any other group. You'll navigate around the story faster, understanding the general idea, figuring out what passages are critical and what can be cut, and even remember it better. And that's something I witnessed with my own eyes. My friend Carl often played this game where you're supposed to guess a word according to 4 pictures, and my other friend Henry almost always found it right away. The words on their own aren't that rare, but you need to be able to identify them only by seeing it in different contexts, which is actually the definition of vocabulary depth. Needless to say that Henry also is a strong reader, reading since he's 5, and he got a pretty vast general knowledge. And he's not alone. In fact, every single long-time reader I personally know shares those exact skills. And I think that's actually why so many people out there focus on building strong reading habits, because the more you read, the deeper your knowledge of the world becomes, and the more context you learn. In order to read faster, you need to read more. And indeed, I had a chance a few months ago to contact the best-selling author Michael Simons, and he personally told me that he reads around 4 hours a day. So that's it. That's the big solution. I had to admit something. As bright as this hypothesis of reading more to read more is, it has a major flaw: forgetting. If you read a difficult book with a lot of information, studies, stories, there's a high chance that you end up forgetting most of it. In the beginnings, it doesn't really matter. You're reading smaller repetitive books like Kiyosaki and all, and everything is so new that you just absorb everything. But eventually, you reach a point where it gets more complex. Different books has different point of views, and some arguments are very difficult to understand. The books are more dense, harder to read, and if you don't have a system to remember the most interesting information, you'll slowly and surely forget them, and you'll never have a chance to apply them. In fact, I fell into this trap last year. What's the solution then? Have a system to remember interesting information. There are 3 ways to do this. 1. Note-taking and concept maps. That's what most of the good readers like Ryan Holiday out there recommend. Simply find a book or an app where you're going to write down the key lessons of the books so you can reread them periodically. Now, everyone is a bit different, and not every technique will work for you. That's why you need to adapt it to your own convenience. 2. Spaced repetition systems. The holy grail of retention is probably the SRR apps. They are programs where you note information and will remind you those questions again right when you're about to forget them. It's like a second brain with all of your knowledge structured. I've been introduced to this by Bartos, the owner of Universe of Memory, and definitely check out his channel if you want a deeper understanding on how to use them, like Anki. And the third one is just read more, bro. Screw those tips. If you enjoy reading without further complication, just read more. But read more about the same subjects. With enough repetition, you'll be able to counteract the effect of forgetting. Whatever system you use, please, it needs to be as practical as possible. Don't use a program like Anki if you don't use your device a lot. Don't take notes if you don't enjoy opening a book. The best techniques are those who allow you to be consistent in the long run. I'm personally going to challenge myself to read 2 hours a day consistently, and I'll keep you updated as it will always be on the channels there. So, what's going to be your reading challenge? Tell me more about it, and I'll see you next time.